Today we'll be discussing about migrant crisis in India. Let me begin by taking you through a timeline. So on March 25th, the Prime Minister of India announced a nationwide lockdown. Within a week, we started getting news about several laborers and workers wanting to go back to their villages, and in order to do that, they did something unimaginable. There were no buses or trains that were operational, so they decided to actually walk back, hundreds and thousands of kilometers back to their villages. The visuals were heart wrenching for many, and it made us so uncomfortable within a few minutes of watching them that we would often switch to different television channels or scroll through our digital screens. But it was very difficult for us to watch something where maybe we cannot help, or it just made us get out of our comfort zone. And it is now more than a month later that the government finally decided to run the Shramik special trains for to help these people to reach back to their villages. The trains were started on May 1st. So let me take you back. March 25th, we had the lockdown announced, and May 1st, the first Shramik trains were started. So it was almost more than a month that the government woke up to these to what was happening to the migrants, and they decided to act on it. This and more we'll be discussing with our esteemed panelists today. We have with us Sabir Ahmed, National Research Coordinator at Pratichi Institute. He has extensively conducted research studies in areas of education, minority rights, and migration. Recently, he has been closely following statistics on migrant laborers in India and has written several pieces in several esteemed publications. Thank you, Sabir, for joining us today. And next, we have Dr. Ritanjan Das with us. He's a senior lecturer at Portsmouth University in UK. He has done his PhD in development studies from the London School of Economics and Political Science. And recently, he conducted extensive field study in Noida on urban development and migrant issues there. So both of panelists have been very close to the ground and in understanding what the migrant laborers are going through. And we're looking forward to a wonderful discussion with both of you today. So let me start actually by recent Supreme Court judgment that has come out. And I would like to start by asking Sabir that why do you think that the court has woken up so late? We are already in the second week of June and these crises have been happening. The migration has been happening for the past month and a half. So what is it that we are looking here?
Yeah. First of all, let's congratulate the Supreme Court coming into the picture, because the today's also judgment has given a very key statistics about the migrant laborer also. That is the take away from today's because now it's documented almost 57 lakhs migrant went back to the home by train, and 41 lakh migrant went back to the home by road. So this is the key takeaway from today's discussion, because we had no information about the migrant, because all the state used to deny about the, for example, West Bengal Chief Minister used to say only 2 lakhs migrants were there in the outside Bengal. And secondly, why Supreme Court has waken up so late? Almost 2 months has gone after the declaration of it. That is the important. One thing, those who are closely following the development in India about the judicial activism, at one point of time, the suo motu cases by Supreme Court was much higher than nowadays. Now, I think it sounds little harsh, but they are disconnected from what is happening on the ground. So that is my initial reaction to this judgment.
We have discussed what has happened now, but I would like to take both of you back a little when all it began. So, Ritanjan, I would like you to come here. That why do you think the government woke up so late? I mean, did they not anticipate something like this will happen? Where did they go wrong in their judgment of this issue that is existing in India? Like, why did it begin in the first place?
The migrant crisis has been a crisis for decades, but it has never had any acknowledgement in our policy circles or government circles, rather. There have been people who have been shouting from rooftops about this, but in government policy making, especially under the current government, or even previous governments for that matter, we have hardly seen any acknowledgement of this problem. So today, when faced with an unprecedented situation, a draconian step, the first casualty of that are the worst affected ones.
Why do you think governments never acknowledged this? Like, Sabir, What do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah. Just to build on what Ritanjan had said, that like virus is from the outside, as if these migrants are from the outside. The behavior of the people or the government was that like this migrant, they suddenly on the road, so they're surprised. One important thing, that this issue has been there since the partition days, but government has never focused such a priority. Just from the one example, in terms of the numbers, it's a huge number. In terms of the out of total migrant, 54.26 million are interstate migrant, and data was collected in 2011.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was released only on 2019. So when when the academics or media will discuss, just few years ago, I don't know what are the policy behind why they have kept this in the under the carpet. And there is even the after the Niti Aayog came, there are some oblique references to the migrant issue only in the economic survey or etc. Only the state, we have to talk about the Kerala. They did a periodic survey of the migrant in terms of migrants who are coming to the Kerala as a destination, or or the people who are migrating from the Kerala. So there is a systematic records keeping system there from the panchayat to upper level, but that is not visible in other states. So that's why certainly they wake up and see that millions of the people are on the street and they want to return back. I want to cite the example of Calcutta. After Amphan, it took 10 days to restore power because there is no migrant laborer who was in the city to restore the power. So that kind of suffering, and realizing this factor, actually the Chief Minister of the Karnataka, he refused to allow the migrant to move out because they are the engine of the city. They run the city, but they were forcefully thrown out, and some people forcefully kept them. So they have no choice at all.
So one issue at hand is that first, we don't have any statistics around migrant workers, and what we have are 2011, which have been released now. So clearly, we are way behind in our statistical understanding of the number of migrant laborers we have in India in the first place. Secondly, there has been a silence from the policy point of view on migrants, and I think there are labor policies in India which go back to pre-independence era, and some after that, but they're not specific policies that concern the migrant laborers in India. But I want to come back to here that I get that lockdown was very draconian in India. Maybe one point of view is that if the government wouldn't have done that, the population of India is so much that social distancing is very difficult to maintain in a country like ours, and maybe such a lockdown was essential or important. But at the same time, there is that whole debate: will you die of COVID-19 or will you die of hunger? So it was important to cushion the migrant workers or the people of a certain class who can't afford their rent or food. And what went behind in the thought of a person to actually think that I'm going to just walk down to my village? Is it income? Is it fear? Is it hunger? What is it that makes you take such a step? Or is it just herd? Okay, my friend is doing it, I'm also going to do it, because there has been narratives which are talking that, laborers are now not even thinking, they just want to go back because their friends are going back. But it's a long journey, it's an arduous journey with no food available, with no water available. So what goes behind someone to actually do that?
This is not the first crisis a migrant family or migrant person is facing. Their lives have been in crisis for decade after decade, with very little change. These people are the product of the agricultural crisis in rural India. Okay, they have seen their livelihoods essentially getting destroyed, no chance of education, no social security, no jobs. The only way to just barely live is to move hundreds and hundreds of miles away from home. And when they move somewhere, if you and I move to a new place and stay for 5 years, that becomes, we kind of build a comfortable home there. But these people, they might be staying for 30, 40 years. I mean, I've worked with migrant laborers who have stayed in, say, Noida for 30 years. Since the inception of the city in 1976, there have been people who have been working in the city, building the city roads, etc., since that time. But these people, through 40 years, 30 years and 40 years, they live with a constant sense of insecurity. The place, they have no fixed place to live. You know, the sort of jhuggi that they live in is an illegal one. Tomorrow somebody might come in and just demolish it. So what Sabir was saying, confronted with a new crisis, a crisis which can actually kill you, essentially, anytime. The last refuge is this place that they call home. And this place is hundreds and hundreds of miles away in a village somewhere. Most of these people, and that's something we came across when we are working with migrant laborers, that, I'll give you an example of a young man, 26 years old, who was essentially born in Noida. Or he came to Noida when he was 2 or 3 with his parents. So he have grown up in North India. He's a Delhiite or however you want to call it, a UPite rather, sorry. But he also says, no, my home is back in the village. That's where I am from. So a sense of identity, the sense of home that these migrant populations have is linked with where they originally come from. And faced with this new crisis where you can literally die in 2 days' time, and with all sort of livelihood, be it where they are staying there's no jobs having been gone, no source of food, anything, the country literally just stopping within 4 hours. What would you do? If you and I are faced with a crisis when you are out on the streets, if something goes wrong, we'll come and run back home. Again, none of us can actually interpret their mindsets or their psychology. But looking at it from outside or interacting with them, the amount Sabir and I have done, it's the level of desperation is something we can't really conceive of.
So 4-5 decades ago, a desperation of the amount of stress that they had at their homes in villages, where we call it the rural distress or the agriculture distress, drove them to cities in want of a better life. And now a desperation to go back home to a place which is safe has driven them to take that journey. But that's rural stress that first made them come to the city has not gone. We have still got that agriculture stress. So don't you think that when they go back, there is nothing there to look forward economically there, because agriculture is still in distress? Right now we're looking at a bumper crop, but that is again not a boon for farmers, but actually a bane, because it's going to drive the prices down with the high supply. So what do you think there, Sabir? Like, this rural stress is still there. Do you think that we need what Gandhiji said of having self-sufficient self-sufficient villages is more important than ever now, and that's the real Atmanirbharta that we should have been looking all this while since independence?
One thing, we can't arrest the migration. It will happen. One good thing is that people from the city assume that this migrant will never go back to the cities. But fortunately, if the employer has started sending the transport for them, for example, from West Bengal, just yesterday from the Odisha and Tamil Nadu, from Odisha particularly, one factory has sent 2 buses to bring back their own migrant to the plant. So I know that is one. Despite the journey, the ordeal they endure, they still wants to go back because they get their 700 rupees there per day, and here in the source area there is nothing. Some efforts were made by introducing the Narega, that over the year, especially after coming of this, they had reduced it into a like a fund, and that is not working. But again, they have realized the importance of kind of incentive through, and that is a beautiful program. I studied, I have spoken to many women who had participated and how that has changed their life. But there are other couple of things we need to look at in terms of self-sufficiency. The government has implementing for a couple of years national livelihood mission, for example, that that is also not working primarily because again it's a policy design at Delhi, and it will not help to implement for fit for all size kind of policy, like water policy for Cherrapunji and Rajasthan will not work in it. So kind of liberty has to be given to the panchayat level people. That is not happening. Although in our law books, huge power is given to the local self-governance. But in practice, now everywhere, every state, more centralized approach. Like in a center, you see one person centric approach. In the state, you see the chief minister wants to connect direct to the video, prime minister want to connect to the DM. That will not solve the problem of India.
I want to actually here talk about another stress that the panchayats and the rural community is facing right now, is that the workers who are coming back to their homes may be carriers of COVID-19. And so there are two things with it. First, there is stigma attached with it, unfortunately, like people are not willing to declare that they are seeing symptoms of it in themselves. And secondly, the pockets which were maybe untouched from COVID-19, where it may be difficult to reach because lack of transport, lack of people moving in and out. That's not happening, but now it is. Like there are people from cities who are going back to their villages and maybe carriers of COVID-19. So Sabir, have you seen any case studies there where you've experienced that the villages are undergoing stress and the people who are coming back maybe not being accepted that well in their villages?
Yeah, there are several cases. One, if you see the statistics of before the migration train started moving, there are hardly very few cases from the neighboring districts from the Calcutta, but there is a surge after they started coming, and the tension started begin because there is no quarantine facilities in the village. One tension, if government intends to set up a quarantine center inside the village, some the villager also objecting to set up that. They have no mechanism to give some kind of relief who are coming. So often you see, I don't know whether you're here all those three, they are taking either they're making temporary kind of a makeshift arrangement in the open sky, or they are making arrangement on the top of the tree. In Purulia district they have with some bamboo they prepare a kind of temporary shelter at the tree. And who will provide them the food? Lot of tensions
to save themselves from elephants.
Yeah, and stigma attached to it. Sometimes they refuse to enter into the village, and then on the top of that, the whole kind of rumor of all the communal angle is also given to that. They are the carrier of this virus, etc. And then two communal riots also happen in Bengal on the pretext that they are spreading the rumor that they are the carrier. They attended the Jamaati Majlis in Delhi. So it's in complete chaos in the rural destination. Some volunteers are definitely working. They're providing food through the community kitchen, etc. There are good Samaritans. They are working there. But the preparedness we expected from the panchayat, they don't have the fund, they don't have the mechanism to deal with such crisis.
And if I can just add, pittance we spent on healthcare in GDP percentage. If you look at developed countries, one of the key features of development is the amount you spend on healthcare and education. Our country is given all its stock of development and high GDP and all of that, we spend a pittance. We are amongst one of the lowest spenders in terms of lowest spenders on healthcare in terms of GDP proportion. So we were not prepared. We are not prepared to face a situation like this at all. Next time, who knows?
So as a country, we may be hailing an actor Sonu Sood as the messiah or the Batman of Avengers for the country, but it's actually the work of the government that is required, because as all the NGOs that I have spoken to, or people who have been doing a lot of work on ground by providing meals and everything, they always say that we can only reach out to as many people.
Absolutely, yeah.
What we provide is a very short-term solution and just like plugging the hole to make sure that the people that we know don't die of hunger. But it's actually at the systemic and the policy level where the government has to step in to solve it once and for all. So,
I mean, isn't it a sad condition that we have to? I mean, Sonu Sood has done fantastic work, but that we have to hail Sonu Sood, to have saved so many migrants and not talk of the government or policy or what they are doing. I mean, we have to think of Avenger and Batman to solve the crisis and not of policy. I mean, that is a very sad state of affairs.
And it's a wonderful discussion, but I think now we're running out of time. So I want to end it on a more hopeful note. And that would be that, so the issues of migrant workers have come to the forefront with COVID-19. Unfortunate way to come to the forefront, but at least now we are looking at it. So what do you think should be the 3 takeaways from a policy point of view that we should be taking, and going ahead, what are the reforms that you would like to suggest? Maybe we can start with Sabir and then Ritanjan can.
Yeah. The one important thing, one takeaway from this, one is the gradually the government and also the industry started recognizing the importance of migrant laborers. They have started feeling that without them, although we have the situation we are facing today is the neglect over decades. There is no such provision. So this is the time, although it's a crisis time, it's given an opportunity to reflect upon that who runs the engine. We should also take care of that force, for the workforce. So it's also connected with what Ritanjan has just rightly said that we need to. It's the right time to look at the labor laws, in a holistically, broadly. This is number 2 and third point. I would like to highlight on the role of local self-governance. Gradually in India, democracy is not. It's by only one person. It's by few person. It has to by discussion and involving the grassroots level democracy. Here in this context, the panchayat and local self bodies like municipal corporation. So they need to empower to build a real, if you call it Atmanirbhar Bharat. So then this is the time, you have to, it is already there in the constitution, in the 73rd Amendment, 74th Amendment, but that is never, never implemented so rigorously. Now, I think we should focus on. Otherwise, all the policy with good and intention will fail, and we'll be focusing on, as Ritanjan has said, signing India, making India, digital India, will not flourish unless we focus on the capability approach. For example, on education, their welfare, and the role of the state is clearly defined. What to do for in the states. So I think if we summarize this is the key things we need to take it forward.
And Ritanjan?
No, I absolutely agree with Sabir. One good thing that has come out of it's not a good thing, but if you say the cloud with the silver lining, is that we cannot afford to ignore the migrant crisis anymore. It is right in our face. Okay, I mean, I'm having conversations with my friends. I mean, as we all are, with friends and family members who are actually expressing surprise that हमारे देश में इतने migrant laborers थे, कहाँ से आ रहे ये लोग? That kind of conversations. They have conveniently, not to their fault, but the climate, the political and social and the cultural climate that we live in have enabled us to forget that 70-80% of our population. But now we can't. The coronavirus pandemic has thrusted the migrant question, the crisis in our face. Every day, that's what we are seeing. We can't avoid. So there has to be some acknowledgement. Obviously, at a policy level, government policy level, also at a social level. We need to. This is a problem. Our country is not about all the digital and Make in India and shining and all of that kind of stuff. This is the reality of it, and we need to acknowledge that to begin with. Any policy, any solution starts with acknowledgement. So that's number 1. Number 2, something Sabir said at the beginning, I think, we need data. We need to understand the scale of the problem. We need to understand how many people from where at a district level. I don't think whatever surveys the NSS has done, we don't know the actual breakdown below district level. I think, Sabir can correct me on that. We don't get migrant statistics, we get aggregate figures, but we don't get beyond the district level. So we need more data. where these people are going, what kind of jobs are they in, what's their living condition. There has to be a massive effort on understanding the situation. Before you can suggest solutions, you need to have data, you need to have information, you need to have a clear picture. So that is a very, very important thing. And lastly, the largest situation, the policy prescription that Sabir was talking about, that we can't become Atmanirbhar in the sense by what our Prime Minister is saying, by discarding foreign brands. But yes, we can become self-reliant by creating opportunities, not just employment opportunities, healthcare opportunities, education opportunities, and over and above everything, empowerment. That comes through the panchayats, that comes through proper decentralization of power. So now we are facing a crisis that has been brewing for decades. It's now literally burst out in the open, and I mean, the genie is out of the bottle, so to say, and we can't put it back. If we do not empower the majority of our country, essentially, none of the shining slogans, irrespective of however many shining slogans we formulate of our country, not really much is going to change. So the focus on empowerment through healthcare, education, decentralization, economic opportunities, role of women. We are seeing so many stories of gender violence, etc., having spiked on the situation. Without that kind of an empowerment, nothing will change. So that is the third policy focus, we will call it.
So I can say here that anything to correct or make things better of the current situation, a lot of policies have to come in place. We have to work in sync with each other to make things better for actually people. I don't know if the word is only migrant laborers or poor people. I think it's a lot of people who need these policies to work in the right direction for their lives to become better. And hopefully our government will wake up and do that. But it was lovely speaking with both of you to get an understanding of the current crisis, even to understand what goes in the mind of the person who takes that sort of a journey back to his or her village.